First of all, it must be known who the God of heaven is, since upon all that the other things depend. This was written by Emanuel Swedenborg. Swedenborg was born on the 29th of January 1688, in the Gregorian calendar that would be February the 9th, with the surname Swedberg, but he changed it later in life to Swedenborg. His father was a professor of theology at the University of Uppsala and went on to become Bishop of Skara. So young Swedenborg was brought up in a highly religious family, and as a child he said that he used to hold his breath during prayers because he thought it would help him with his connection to God. Holding his breath like this was like a meditation where it helped him to concentrate his thoughts into his prayers. As a young man he studied philosophy and maths, but he became adept at many trades throughout his early life, writing scientific journals and books on astronomy. He met Edmund Halley while he lived in London. He had ideas for inventions that were before his time. He wanted to make designs for flying machines, and when he became a civil servant, he worked in the metallurgy department, creating machines that were efficient in the mining industry. He also designed a device that he named a universal musical instrument, which he said that anybody could play a tune on, and I quote here, by the aid of which the most unskilled in music can play all kinds of harmonies that are found in the score. Swedenborg also wrote poetry, though most of his poems are about people he admired, both dead and alive, and this collection of poetry was published in 1919, Emanuel Swedenborg Opera Poetica. Swedenborg was intrigued with the human body and the mind and how they work together. He was interested in the mental health as well as the physical health of people, and worked on a new theory and a new practice that he said was a method of conjecturing the wills and affections of men's mind by means of analysis. This would be what would now be termed as psychoanalyst. Swedenborg studied medicine and the human body because he was looking for answers to this question: how does the human body function? He soon figured this out from his anatomical studies, so his questions became deeper. Where and what is the soul? Where and what is the spirit? He was having difficulty finding the soul. It was being elusive, but he soon realized that the soul was not a physical thing, that it existed on a different plane to the physical body, which is why it could not be seen. He was convinced that the soul existed in a replica, spiritual double of the person. To Swedenborg, the soul was the real person, the essence of the person, and lived in all realms. The physical body was just a vehicle for that soul on this earthly plane. Swedenborg wrote 3 volumes, The Realm of the Soul, in 1743, discussing his findings on the human soul and explanations as to why, when one died on this physical plane, one still lived on in the spiritual world. To Swedenborg, this was because the soul, after departing the dead physical body, continued on in its spiritual body in the spiritual world. He wrote, "In fact, death is a continuation of life, but a continuation in another world. That world is invisible to the eyes of the physical body, but can be seen there in that light that outshines the noonday light of this world 1,000 times." In the years 1743 to 4, he began a dream diary. He was travelling between Sweden and Holland when he wrote this, and the dream diary was published as the Dream Journal. It is a collection of accounts of his dreams and psychic visions of that time, which were becoming more prolific. The most significant moment happened on April the 6th, 1744. In the Dutch hotel that he was staying at, he had a series of psychic experiences, which started with terrible temptations, which went on for most of the night, but then ended with his vision of Jesus Christ. The Saviour Christ appeared to Swedenborg in physical form and spoke with him. They discussed the future of faith and religion in this world. It was exactly a year later that he had another psychic experience with the Christ. This time he was in London, England. The Christ told Swedenborg that he had been chosen to pass on a message to humanity that would be a new revelation, and to be able to do that, Christ was bestowing upon Swedenborg a special gift, a key to the other realms. Christ told Swedenborg that he was to prepare the people for the second coming through the new church that he ordained Swedenborg to set up. Swedenborg was not only able to see into, but actually enter and be a part of the worlds of spirit, of the heavens, and of hell, and he could do this any time he wished. He was able to communicate with the occupants in them, the spirits of the dead, and he was also to let them, the spirit, see through his eyes into this earthly world. Swedenborg now speaks to any person who had ever lived. He said he spent a year on and off talking with St. Paul, and he made acquaintance with many other well-known people from the past. When this second event occurred, Swedenborg was writing The Worship of Love and God, but he stopped writing and instead threw himself into learning the ancient languages of Greek and Hebrew, so that he could talk with the prophets of the Old Testament and the ancient Greek philosophers. At the age of 59, Swedenborg took early retirement so that he could concentrate on his new spiritual findings and to write his spiritual diary. He had been shown a vision by Christ about what the new church was to be, and he now had a new and more fuller understanding of what the Bible teachings actually meant. Swedenborg put together a Bible concordance revealing the true significance to the Old and New Testaments and named it Index Biblicus. The new revelation that he had received from Christ was that each person was now responsible for his or her own development into the celestial kingdom, and that one need not go through organized religion any more. This was what the new church was to be, each person able to discover the divine through their own self. Swedenborg wrote, "Angels say that each of us has a central or highest place into which the divine flows directly. They call this place God's gateway to us, and his true home is within us." Even though they followed the teachings of Christ, those that joined this new church became known as Swedenborgians. In 1768, charges were brought against the Swedenborgians for heresy, but they were able to prove that they followed and taught Christ's word, that they were true Christians, and that the theology of Swedenborg agreed with Christian doctrine. But some of his theology and writings are out of this world, literally. Earths in the Universe is a book Swedenborg wrote, in which he explains that there are many inhabited worlds throughout the universe, and that it was the same in the spiritual world, where the dead resided. The spiritual universe is a spiritual copy of the material universe, and Swedenborg was able to travel to these worlds, both spiritual and material versions. In the book The Heavenly Doctrine, Swedenborg writes about how the Lord opened his eyes so that he could walk between all these different worlds, all inhabited with beings created by the one true God. And I shall end with a quote from Swedenborg. "After our life in this world, we all live forever. This is because we are then no longer physical, but spiritual.